Don Rickles could make anyone laugh. Presidents, movie stars, and even Frank Sinatra. But his most memorable stage partner was Johnny Carson. Night after night, their chemistry lit up The Tonight Show. And to the world, it looked like a friendship built on laughter and trust. Yet, when Carson walked away from late night in 1992, everything changed. What Rickles thought he was promised never came true, and the bitterness that followed would haunt him for years. Before his death, Rickles finally revealed the truth about Johnny Carson that few could have imagined. Don Rickles' rise to fame. Comedy has always been about timing, delivery, and making people laugh when they least expected. And in the golden age of television, two men stood at the very top of that world. Johnny Carson and Don Rickles. Both of them in their own way changed comedy forever. On screen, they looked like best friends, constantly teasing each other and making America laugh night after night. But the truth behind their relationship was far more complicated, and before his death, Don Rickles finally opened up about what it was really like. Don Rickles, the man who could insult anyone from Hollywood royalty to political leaders and somehow make them laugh harder than anyone else in the room, was born on May 8, 1926 in Queens, New York to Jewish immigrant parents. Don grew up in the neighborhood of Jackson Heights, and inside his home, the Yiddish language and culture were part of daily life. Don once said that being Jewish shaped his sense of humor and his quick wit, and also gave him that sharp edge that audiences would eventually love. Like so many young men of his generation, Rickles' life was interrupted by World War II. At just 18 years old in 1944, he joined the United States Navy and served aboard the USS Cyrene, a motor torpedo boat tender. Although he didn't see direct combat, the discipline and friendship of the Navy left a mark on him. It also gave him time to think about what he wanted from life once he returned home. When the war finally ended, Rickles already knew he wanted to be an actor. He signed up at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York, one of the most respected acting schools in the country. He worked hard, hoping to land dramatic roles in film or television. But the truth was, acting work didn't come easily. He faced constant rejection, and the frustration started to build. Finally, in the early 50s, Rickles decided to try something different. He turned to stand-up comedy, not because he had the dream of being a comedian, but because it was a way to stay on stage, to perform, and to connect with an audience. At first, he tried standard jokes, but they didn't have the impact he was looking for. It wasn't until some hecklers interrupted his act one day that Rickles finally found his signature act. He snapped back at them with quick, cutting insults, but instead of offending the crowd, it brought the house down. People loved it. In fact, they laughed harder at his comebacks than at his rehearsed material. And that was the moment Don Rickles discovered his true gift. He leaned into this insult comedy style, perfecting it over time. His act wasn't about telling long stories or punchlines. It was about tearing into whoever was in the room, but it wasn't mean-spirited. That was the magic of Rickles. He could insult someone in the harshest way and still make them feel like they were in on the joke. That balance would define his entire career. One night, in Miami Beach, that style changed his life forever. Sitting in the audience was none other than Frank Sinatra, the most powerful entertainer in the country. Rickles spotted him and didn't hesitate. He looked straight at Sinatra and said, "Make yourself at home." Frank hit somebody. The room erupted. Everyone knew Sinatra's reputation for toughness, but here was a young comedian daring to poke fun at him. Sinatra loved it, and just like that, he became Rickles' biggest supporter, spreading the word about him to his friends in show business. That endorsement opened the doors of Las Vegas. Rickles became a headliner, playing to packed crowds and earning the nicknames, the Merchant of Venom, and ironically, Mr. Warmth. Those names captured the contradiction of his act. Venom in delivery, but warmth in spirit. People came not just to laugh, but to be roasted by Don Rickles himself. From there, his television career took off. He was a frequent guest on talk shows like the Dean Martin Celebrity Roasts, where he would tear into celebrities of every background, from actors to politicians to even athletes, and somehow leave everyone smiling. But he wasn't just a stand-up star. Rickles also found success in television and film. He starred in the sitcom CPO Sharky in the late 1970s, and before that, he had The Don Rickles Show, a short-lived sitcom that still showcased his sharp timing. He also had roles in movies like Run Silent, Run Deep with Clark Gable and Burt Lancaster, proving he could handle serious acting when given the chance. And even in his later years, the recognition kept coming. In 2007, he won an Emmy Award for the documentary Mr. Warmth, the Don Rickles Project, which celebrated his life and career. It was a fitting tribute to a man who had spent decades shaping comedy and influencing countless performers who came after him. But behind the laughs, the television appearances, and the friendships with Hollywood royalty, there was another side to Rick's story that he rarely spoke about publicly. Rickles' hidden pain. Don Rickles built his career on laughter, but away from the spotlight, he carried a very different story. Audiences saw the quick comebacks, the big smile, and the endless energy. What they didn't always see was that Rickles had a private life, filled with both joy and heartbreak. He had his moments of love, but there were also moments of deep personal loss. In 1965, Rickles' life changed when he married Barbara. He often joked that she was the one who made it possible for him to survive all those years in show business. Barbara wasn't just his wife, she became his anchor, and together they had 2 children, Mindy and Larry. Don loved being a father, though by his own daughter's account, he wasn't always the most openly expressive man at home. Mindy Rickles later described her father as deeply loving but emotionally guarded. She explained that Don could shower the world with jokes and laughter, but when it came to opening up about his deepest feelings, he held back. That was part of the hidden side of Rickles. The same man who could stand in front of 1,000 people and fearlessly roast a celebrity often struggled to put words to his own vulnerabilities within his family. However, she made it clear that despite this fact, he was the perfect father and husband. In her words, he was a very loving dad. He never insulted us. His son, Larry Rickles, followed a different path into entertainment. Larry became a writer and producer, and in 2007, he won an Emmy Award as part of the team behind Mr. Warmth, the Don Rickles Project. That it was a proud moment for Don, who often said that his family's accomplishments meant more to him than his own. But just 3 years later, tragedy struck. In 2011, Larry died unexpectedly at the age of 41 from pneumonia. Don Rickles had made his entire career out of laughter, but losing a child was a pain that went far beyond words. Rickles was beyond devastated, and though he didn't talk about it publicly in detail, those close to him noticed a change. His humor remained, but there was a heavier layer beneath it. The loss of Larry was something he carried with him for the rest of his life, but it wasn't the only burden. Because while Rickles loved his friendship with many stars, he wasn't immune to friendship disputes. Over the years, whispers and rumors surfaced that Rickles had complicated feelings toward Frank Sinatra, the same man who had once been responsible for launching him into stardom. Rickles never publicly confirmed all the rumors, but multiple reports claimed that he sometimes expressed resentment toward the singer. The most shocking part of these rumors came from allegations that Sinatra had a dark role in Marilyn Monroe's tragic story. According to these reports, Rickles believed that Sinatra had exploited Monroe in Hollywood. These were controversial claims, and while Rickles never made them openly in front of cameras, they left a lasting impact on his reputation in Hollywood circles. To the world, he was Mr. Warmth, the man who could insult anyone and get away with it. But within his own life, he carried grief, regrets, and opinions that didn't always fit the image people had of him. And yet, despite these private struggles, Rickles never let the audience see him falter. He always walked onto the stage with confidence, ready to unleash his sharp wit. But soon, another figure would enter his story in a way that would define much of his career. Johnny Carson, the king of late-night television, became both his greatest ally and his most complicated friend. On screen, their chemistry was undeniable, but behind the curtain, it was a relationship marked by more than just jokes. The Tonight Show era. When Don Rickles first walked onto the stage of The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson in 1965, he had no idea that it would become one of the most defining platforms of his career. What began as a guest appearance quickly grew into a recurring role, not as a host or performer, but as the ultimate wild card. Over time, Rickles became one of Carson's most frequent visitors, racking up more than 100 appearances, and each one was unpredictable, unscripted, and unforgettable. The chemistry between Carson and Rickles worked because it was built on contrast. Johnny Carson was smooth, calm, and perfectly timed. He played the straight man better than anyone in television history. Rickles, on the other hand, was chaos, loud, brash, and never afraid to say the